This time on the Shred School, we're learning the 5-0 grind. Let's get started. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, the channel where you can learn something new about skateboarding 3 times a week. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we talk about something in the skateboarding world, from culture to tricks to anything in between. Today we are learning the 5-0 grind. So before you get started on the 5-0, there are a couple of tricks you should be able to do. You should be able to do 50-50s, which are pretty simple, and you should also be able to hold a manual on flat for a little while. I don't think you need to be able to ollie into a manual on an obstacle. That's a little bit tougher. You need to be able to get the full distance, and you have to land perfectly straight and all that stuff. Stuff that you don't have to worry about with a 5-0. So I think 5-0s are actually easier. The next thing you have to do is pick a good spot. So I did these on a couple of different spots to show you some variation. Low is better for this one because with a 5-0 you have to ollie way above the obstacle and then put the tail down. So you actually have to be able to clear the obstacle really easily. So start with something pretty low, pretty comfortable, something that's going to grind really easily. For things like nose grinds and crooked grinds, it actually helps to be a little higher. With this one, it helps to be lower. So just pick something really easy, really comfortable, and then let's get started. Your foot position is going to depend on the obstacle and your skill level with ollies and things like that. But a good base to start with is something like this. You want to have a really stable foot position. You want to be able to cover as much of the tail as possible because you want to land back on the tail in that 5-0. If you're like this and you're going to pop it as hard as you can, you're going to have to find the tail in the air. If you pop more from a stable foot position, it'll be easier to land that way. So again, if you're going to do it on something a lot higher, you're going to need to be able to pop it harder, but try to just keep a more stable foot position for your back foot. Front foot, you know, anywhere that helps, but you're going to want to land pretty far up to help with the balance. So keep that in mind. Now, if you want some practice before you get into this trick, you want to feel a little bit more comfortable, what I do sometimes is this. So you sit next to the curb or the obstacle you're going to do, and you ollie up and put the tail down on it. This is going to help a little bit. It'll help you feel more comfortable with the motion. It doesn't feel that much like a 5-0 because with the actual trick, you do have the approach angle that helps you get up onto it, helps you clear it a little bit. This way, you ollie kind of straight and then push the tail over. I do think it helps just to feel a little bit more comfortable, feel more confident in being able to get that height and everything that you need. But you can skip that step if you want to just jump right into it. So with the approach for this one, what I will typically do is do as little of an angle as possible. Approach very, very mild angle because you want to keep as much of your speed going forward as possible. If you approach at a really sharp angle, you hit the obstacle, and then that slows you down. So that's not really going to do you a lot of good. Also for this one, I like to land in the middle. I don't like to grind off the end. And that might just be the way that I learned how to skate. I had all these boxes I had built and I put them in my driveway. Instead of pulling them out, I would just leave them in the grass. So I would have to roll up, grind, and then land back off of it. And that's still the way that I do grinds. But I like it that way better because you have a little more control. You're not really forced to land when the thing ends. You can land when you start to lose your balance or when you start to lose your speed. You have more control that way. So for me, it helps to approach at a very mild angle, then ollie up onto it and push it ahead slightly. So that's the way I do it. So you roll up when you start to get close, pop a lot harder than you think you'll have to. If, like on these bleachers right here, you almost have to ollie like you're going to 50-50 the next step up from a height perspective. You have to get way up above it and then put that tail down. As you can see, the tail kind of stays low the whole way, but I am actually ollieing, leveling it out, and then pushing it down. It doesn't really look that way, but if I didn't, the board would just kind of keep going up and up and up, and I would kind of be, you know, straight up in the air and hit the side of the curb or the ledge or whatever. So you have to do a real ollie. You can't drag your tail down while you're trying to get up. You have to ollie up and then put the tail down on it. One thing that helps for me, and I think this makes a really big difference, is if you try to push the tail ahead of you instead of moving your weight backward. If you ollie up and then lean back, you're more likely to slip out. But if you ollie and then push the board into, like push the tail to be in the middle of your body, that'll help you land a little bit more solid. So get plenty of height and try to push the tail in the middle of you, and that should really help you get into that balance and get you locked into it. So the big question at this point is, do you drag the tail or not? And that's completely up to you. Some of the ones you'll see me do, I do drag it, sometimes I don't. I think a perfect 5-0 would be the tail like this close to dragging, because I don't want mine to look like a manual. If you're halfway between and you're kind of grinding like this, I don't think it really looks as good. If you have your weight 100% on the tail, I think that looks more like a 5-0 grind rather than a manual, but some people don't like the look of that either. So completely a style choice. Both are legitimate. It's not like if you did an ollie manual and drag the tail, when it wouldn't count. 5-0s can be either way. Doesn't matter. You can also do it at a little bit of an angle too, and grind that way. It's all completely fine. So do what feels comfortable for you. Just get up there, try to do the trick a few times and see what feels right. That's going to be in your hands. So grind for a little bit, and then there's a couple different ways to land. The way I do it is I start to push the board ahead. It starts to turn a little bit like this, and then when it gets to the right point, I just pull it off. And that's really all there is to it. I just, like, the truck's kind of locked in and I pull it right off. It feels just like dropping off a curb. If you were to do it kind of at an angle, you just lift up, you hop a little bit, and you just pull the board right off. It's a really easy way to go. With the 5-0, it's almost halfway done for you. You don't have to lift the nose up or anything. You're already up. You just kind of hop off. That one's pretty easy, assuming you're locked in right. So one of the problems with this curb that I skated, it's a double-sided curb, but the other side had all that grass on it and stuff, and I couldn't get completely above the curb, so I'm trying to grind half of the curb, and so I'm grinding like the middle of my truck, and the board's at a big angle. It's kind of tipped like this while I'm doing the grind. And so when I try to land it, sometimes the board will just tip over. And that's kind of a problem with the spot. I probably shouldn't have been trying to skate there, but the problem was the park where the other bench was that I later did was so full I couldn't possibly skate there at the moment. What you want, though, is to be locked in as close to the wheel as you can, which is how it is with the bench. So if you're locked in like that, the board is pretty much flat. You're tipped a little bit, but you're mostly flat, and it just feels like you're dropping off. If you're on the edge like that and you're tipped way over, that makes it a bit harder. So that just has to do with the spot, though. The other way to land is to just ride off the end, and I don't really do these this way, but that's just riding right off. That's pretty simple. That might be the easier way for you depending on what you're comfortable with. So that is the 5-0 grind. Here are some that I filmed for you. Try to do a couple different spots. Hopefully this gives you a good impression of how it should feel and what you should do. Just go out there, get comfortable with it, practice some 50-50s first, and then go out there and just go for it. And then after you learn the 5-0, here are some more tricks you might want to learn next. And don't forget to subscribe so you can keep learning new things about skateboarding 3 times a week. Thanks for watching.